The airfield lights glimmered through the haze as Captain Reynolds coaxed the battered A-10 over the final stretch of rugged terrain. Each vibration a violent reminder of the fragile balance between life and destruction. The fuselage groaned and flexed with every minor adjustment, sparks flying from stressed metal panels, warning lights flashing frantically across the cockpit. The smell of burnt hydraulics and scorched fuel thick in her nostrils. Her hands gripped the controls, white-knuckled. Each movement precise yet instinctive, each adjustment a delicate negotiation with a machine pushed beyond its limits. The co-pilot whispered updates, and Reynolds nodded, responding with terse commands, eyes fixed on the runway that stretched ahead, like a fragile promise in the dim morning light. The valley around them was littered with jagged rocks, twisted metal, and debris from past missions, each shadow a potential hazard, every gust of wind a threat to stability. Turbulence shook the plane, violently forcing her to react instantly, banking, adjusting throttle flaps and rudder minute increments, coaxing the fragile aircraft to obey. She could feel every vibration through her body muscles coiled and strained, adrenaline burning through. Exhaustion. Every heartbeat a reminder of the stakes at hand. Sparks leapt from stressed hydraulic panels, the smell of smoke and fuel thick and acrid filling the cockpit. Yet she ignored the discomfort, focusing entirely on coaxing the A-10 through. The final approach. The co-pilot monitored, gauges silently, their eyes flicking back and forth, noting every minor fluctuation. Each subtle warning signal Reynolds pushed onward, knowing that any hesitation, any miscalculation could send them tumbling into the rocky terrain below. The runway lights grew larger in her vision, each step forward a battle against gravity stress and fatigue. She banked slightly, adjusting the trajectory, correcting for gusts that threatened to push the plane off course. Every movement calculated yet instinctive. The fuselage shuddered violently, sparks flying from stressed panels, the warning lights flashing in frantic Morse code that threatened to overwhelm the cockpit instruments. Yet she refused to yield. Each vibration, each tremor, a challenge to her skill and nerve, the plane responding slowly to coaxing movements as if testing her resolve. The terrain below stretched endlessly, dark and jagged, every ridge and outcropping a potential obstacle. She adjusted. Flaps and throttle, minute by minute, maintaining the fragile balance between altitude and speed. Turbulence buffeted the aircraft violently, the fuselage groaning warning lights dancing across panels, smoke curling faintly from damaged hydraulics. Yet she continued inch by inch, coaxing the plane closer to the runway. The co-pilot whispered brief status updates, their calm presence a grounding force amidst chaos. Yet even they could not hide the shared tension of survival on a razor edge. Each gust of wind threatened to throw the plane into a violent spin, yet Reynolds corrected instantly, banking, adjusting rudder, throttle, and flaps with precise micro-movements. Each second stretched endlessly, every heartbeat amplified by adrenaline fatigue and fear. The runway grew closer, the lights shimmering through the smoke and haze. Yet the distance was treacherous every inch, a negotiation with physics and fragile metal. Sparks leapt from stressed panels, smoke and fire curling faintly. Yet she pushed onward, her hands guiding the A-10 with careful precision, coaxing it inch by inch toward salvation. The valley seemed endless, twisted and scarred by past missions, debris scattered across the approach like obstacles in a gauntlet. Reynolds adjusted course minute by minute, maintaining focus despite the physical and mental strain, muscles screaming, eyes stinging from smoke and sweat. The co-pilot whispered final checks, and she responded with nods, eyes fixed entirely on the runway. The glow of light and faint outlines of landing strips stretching ahead. The aircraft groaned violently as she banked slightly to align for landing, sparks flying from stressed panels, the warning lights a frantic chorus of strain. Yet she forced herself to focus every muscle, every thought, every instinct, dedicated to coaxing the A-10 home inch by inch. The final stretch was a perilous ribbon of light and shadow turbulence and strain, threatening to throw the plane into disaster. Yet she pressed on with unwavering focus, guiding the battered aircraft toward the runway. Every second, a battle against fatigue, fear, and mechanical failure. She could feel the vibrations through her entire body, every shudder a warning, every tremor a reminder of how close the fragile balance was to collapse. Sparks and smoke curled faintly from stressed hydraulics, the smell of burnt oil and fuel thick in the cockpit. Yet she pushed onward, coaxing the A-10 through the final moments of a battle fought in silence and sheer will. The runway lights stretched closer each second, the glow a promise of survival. Yet every moment remained fraught with danger as the plane groaned violently under stress, testing the limits of metal and pilot alike. The runway. Light stretched below like a fragile promise as Captain Reynolds guided the battered A-10 through the final descent, every vibration a violent reminder of the fragile balance between survival and disaster. The fuselage groaned with each maneuver, sparks flying from stressed panels, warning lights flashing frantically across the cockpit. Smoke curling from damaged hydraulics filling the air with the acrid smell of burnt fuel and metal. Her hands gripped the controls, white-knuckled every adjustment, precise yet instinctive, coaxing the aircraft to respond inch by inch. The co-pilot monitored gauges, silently whispering brief updates that Reynolds acknowledged with nods and terse commands, eyes fixed on the runway that stretched ahead like salvation. The valley around them was a twisted scar of jagged rocks, twisted metal and debris from previous missions, each shadow a potential threat. Every gust of wind a challenge to stability. Turbulence battered the plane violently, forcing instant corrections. Banking adjusting throttle flaps and rudder with micro-precision, coaxing the fragile aircraft to obey. She could feel every vibration, every shudder through her body muscles, coiled and tense, adrenaline burning through exhaustion, every heartbeat, a reminder of the stakes at hand. Sparks leapt from stressed panels, the smell of smoke and fuel thick in the cockpit. Yet she ignored it, focusing entirely on guiding the A-10 home. Each meter gained downward brought the runway closer, yet multiplied. The risk, each tremor, each gust, threatening to pitch the plane into disaster. Reynolds adjusted course constantly, minute by minute, balancing airspeed, altitude, and angle of descent, every shudder a warning, every vibration, a test of skill, nerve, and courage. The runway lights grew larger in her vision, the glow of salvation. Yet the distance remained treacherous every inch, a negotiation with gravity, fatigue, and failing systems. Sparks and smoke rose faintly from stressed hydraulics, the fuselage, groaning violently as if protesting the final descent. Yet she coaxed it inch by inch, coaxing every panel and surface to obey her commands. The co-pilot whispered status updates, each word measured a lifeline. Reynolds responded with precise micro adjustments, banking slightly, correcting rudder position, managing throttle flaps, every movement a battle against physics and exhaustion. The wind gusted violently, throwing turbulence across the valley, the plane shuddering and groaning with every adjustment. Yet she maintained focus, every heartbeat and breath measured, every muscle coiled for instant reaction. Sparks flew from stressed panels, smoke and fire curling faintly from damaged metal. The warning lights a frantic chorus of strain. Yet she refused to yield. Each moment brought the A-10 closer to the runway, the final stretch, a perilous ribbon of light shadow turbulence and jagged debris. Every vibration a countdown to either survival or catastrophe. Reynolds adjusted flaps and throttle with careful precision, every micro movement coaxing the plane forward inch by inch. The fuselage shuddered. Violently, sparks flying, smoke curling faintly from damaged hydraulics, the smell of burnt fuel thick in the cockpit. Yet she pressed onward, eyes stinging from sweat and smoke, muscles screaming from tension and exertion. She focused entirely on the runway, the glow of light and faint outline of tarmac stretching endlessly below. Her co-pilot whispered a final check, and Reynolds nodded, adjusting course slightly to align perfectly for landing. The final descent was a blur of vibration turbulence and shuddering metal sparks flying from stressed panels, warning lights flashing frantically, every second a battle against disaster. The runway grew nearer. Every movement calculated, every adjustment critical as the A-10 trembled violently under stress. The landing gear touched the tarmac with a jolt, the fuselage groaning violently, sparks flying from stressed metal. As the aircraft skidded slightly on the rough surface, Reynolds maintained control, every muscle coiled, every instinct engaged, guiding the plane forward inch by inch. The engine screamed as she applied brakes, carefully balancing deceleration with stability. The co-pilot, adjusting systems, monitoring instruments silently. Each vibration, each groan a reminder of how close they had come to disaster, yet step by step, the plane slowed, the runway stretching ahead, the horizon open at last. Sparks and smoke still curled faintly from damaged hydraulics, the smell of burnt oil fuel and metal thick in the cockpit. Yet she coaxed the aircraft forward inch by inch toward the final stop. The valley behind them stretched endlessly, a scar of destruction and danger. Yet the runway welcomed them, the glow of safety shimmering with every second. Reynolds guided the A-10 to a halt, her body trembling, every muscle coiled, every nerve alive from the extreme T. The damaged A-10 groaned beneath Captain Reynolds as she pushed onward through the turbulent skies, every vibration a stark reminder of the fragility of the aircraft and the impossibility of the task. She adjusted the throttle with painstaking care, every minor movement threatening to tear the fuselage apart. Sparks flew from stressed panels, warning lights flickering like frantic stars across the cockpit as she coaxed the plane forward, the co-pilot monitoring gauges and systems silently, offering occasional updates in low, measured tones. Their combined focus was absolute, every instinct trained, every movement honed over years of experience. Yet even that was tested to the limits. The horizon ahead stretched endlessly, cloud formations, shifting like living predators, concealing hidden dangers in the guise of shadows and light. Reynolds forced herself to stay calm, her muscles coiled in tension, her fingers gripping the controls, white-knuckled yet precise. Each gust of wind sent violent tremors through the aircraft, the fuselage creaking and whining as if pleading for relief. The smell of burnt hydraulics, oil, and scorched metal filled the cockpit, a constant reminder of the A-10's battered state and of how close they were to failure. Every meter gained upward was a triumph, every shudder a warning of the dangers that still lay ahead. The clouds above thickened, forming a wall of gray that obscured the sun and warped perception of distance and altitude. Reynolds adjusted, the flaps rudder and throttle, minute increments coaxing the plane to respond to her commands. Each adjustment required careful calculation, balancing airspeed, altitude, and engine stress in a delicate dance that left no room for error. The co-pilot watched gauges and indicators, silently their presence a grounding force in the chaos, yet even their calm could not mask the shared tension that gripped them as the plane continued to strain against its damaged frame. Thunder rumbled in the distance, distant storms adding another layer of unpredictability to the flight. Reynolds felt the wind buffet the aircraft violently, each shift forcing instinctive corrections, yet each correction added strain to the already wounded bird sparks leapt from. Stressed metal edges, warning lights flickered in rapid succession, yet she forced herself to ignore them, trusting her skill and the fragile strength of the A-10. Every second stretched endlessly, her heartbeat syncing with the vibration of the engines and the groan of the fuselage. Each glance at the gauges revealed numbers and indicators dancing on the edge of failure, yet she remained focused, scanning the sky below for terrain and above for storm. The aircraft shuddered violently as a sudden downdraft struck, sending her stomach lurching. She corrected instinctively, the fuselage creaking in protest and sparks flying from stressed panels. The clouds opened briefly, revealing a patch of sky below, a hint of the terrain stretching toward home. Yet the relief was fleeting turbulence and unstable air currents, threatening to throw the plane into a violent spin. Reynolds forced herself to maintain focus, each breath measured and deliberate, despite the stress of constant motion and threat. The co-pilot whispered status checks, and she responded with nods and precise commands, each syllable deliberate and controlled, as if speaking too much could break the delicate balance, keeping them aloft. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the fractured metal and scorched fuselage, revealing the scars of past battles and current struggle. The plane trembled with each engine vibration, warning lights flashing frantic signals of stress and potential failure. Yet she coaxed the controls. With meticulous adjustments, each second of flight was a negotiation with gravity, wind, and the wounded systems of the aircraft, each heartbeat a measure of survival. Sparks and smoke curled faintly from stressed hydraulics, the smell of burning oil, thick in the air, making every breath a battle. Yet she forced herself to ignore discomfort and focus on the horizon. The mountains below rose like jagged teeth, dark shadows cutting through the cloud cover, each ridge a potential disaster if miscalculated. Reynolds adjusted trajectory ever so slightly, coaxing the A-10 through the gaps, navigating a labyrinth of air currents and damaged systems. The co-pilot's eyes met hers briefly in the corner of the cockpit, a silent acknowledgement that they were surviving through skill, courage, and determination. Yet the danger was far from over. Every turbulence, every violent shudder reminded them that one mistake, one miscalculation could end the journey, and yet Reynolds pushed forward, guiding the wounded aircraft toward home, inch by inch, meter by meter, coaxing it through clouds, wind, and mechanical strain. Every movement, a testament to her resolve, and every vibration, a reminder that the impossible was still within reach. The horizon stretched endlessly, but hints of civilization emerged through breaks in clouds and rain. Yet the final challenge was still ahead, and the A-10 shuddered violently as if testing whether its pilot could endure long enough to drag it home. The valley below stretched like a jagged scar as Captain Reynolds guided the battered A-10 closer to home, each vibration a violent reminder of how fragile the aircraft had become. Her hands never left the controls, fingers white-knuckled on throttles and rudder, every adjustment, a calculated negotiation with the plane itself. The fuselage groaned with every maneuver, warning lights flickering frantically across the cockpit, the smell of burnt hydraulics oil and scorched metal thick in the air, filling her lungs and making each breath a battle. She scanned the terrain below for potential hazards, twisted trees, shattered roads, and crumbling rooftops, all threatening to turn a minor miscalculation into catastrophe. The co-pilot whispered updates, monitoring gauges and instruments silently, yet every glance and every gesture spoke volumes, conveying the tension and shared desperation of two people fighting against physics and fate. Reynolds felt sweat trickle down her temple, mixing with soot and grime streaking her vision. Yet she ignored the discomfort, her focus absolute. Each meter gained forward was a small victory, each shudder and vibration a reminder of the fragile balance keeping them aloft. The clouds above shifted, darkening the sky momentarily, obscuring the valley below and forcing her to rely entirely on instruments, instinct, and experience. Sparks flew from stressed panels, warning lights flashing in rapid succession, Yet she maintained course, coaxing the wounded aircraft forward inch by inch. Each adjustment was precise, minute, careful calculations, balancing throttle flaps and rudder to keep the plane from exceeding its limits. The valley seemed endless, with shadows stretching across the wreckage and broken landscape below. Every ridge and crag posed potential danger. A collision or miscalculation could end everything instantly. She forced herself to maintain calm focus, each breath measured, ignoring the pounding of her heart and the screaming of fatigue in her muscles. The co-pilot shifted slightly, adjusting systems and monitoring indicators, offering brief status updates. Reynolds responded with terse nods and hand signals, conserving energy and attention for the critical task ahead. Thunder rumbled in the distance, distant storms sending gusts and turbulence that battered the fuselage violently. Each shudder a reminder of how close they were to disaster. Sparks and smoke rose from stressed hydraulics, the smell of burning fuel thick in the cockpit, making every second a struggle to maintain clarity and focus. She guided the aircraft through a narrow corridor between two jagged ridges, the terrain unforgiving and the wind unpredictable, each second a test of skill and nerve. The fuselage flexed and groaned. Under stress, warning lights flashing frantic signals of strain, yet she coaxed it through each motion, trusting her experience and the fragile strength of the A-10. Every gust of wind, every violent turbulence was a challenge to her control. Each adjustment, a battle to maintain stability. She could see the faint glimmer of the airfield ahead, lights shimmering through the haze and smoke. Yet the distance was treacherous, each second increasing the risk of catastrophic failure. Sparks leapt from stressed metal warning lights screaming for attention, yet she ignored them, focusing entirely on bringing the plane home. The valley narrowed, forcing precise maneuvers over broken ground, jagged rocks and twisted metal debris from previous battles, every movement critical and fraught with risk. Reynolds felt her muscles scream fatigue, yet pushed onward knowing that hesitation could be fatal. The co-pilot checked systems and whispered updates, the words barely audible over the roar of engines and the groan of metal, each one a lifeline of information. Reynolds adjusted flaps and throttle minute increments, each movement precise to coax the aircraft forward inch by inch, every shudder a warning, every vibration a reminder of limits pushed to the edge. Sparks flew from stressed panels, smoke curling faintly from damaged hydraulics. Yet she pressed on through fear and exhaustion toward the glowing lights that marked the airfield. The horizon stretched with the promise of survival. Yet the final approach demanded every ounce of skill, focus, and courage, the plane trembling beneath her, as if questioning whether it could endure one last maneuver. Reynolds adjusted trajectory slightly, banking low over jagged terrain, sparks flying as the fuselage scraped dangerously close to rocky outcroppings. Yet she guided the A-10 with steady hands and a resolute will. The co-pilot whispered one last check, and she nodded, focusing entirely on the runway, the airfield lights, shimmering like a fragile promise. The plane groaning under the strain, every vibration a countdown to either success or disaster. She could feel the sweat stinging her eyes, her muscles screaming, and her. The sun had barely risen over the horizon when Captain Reynolds climbed into the cockpit of her A-10, the smell of burnt hydraulics and scorched metal filling the air. She ran her hands over the worn controls, each button switch and lever a reminder of years spent mastering the beast. The commander had said it was impossible, that she would never fly again, that the damage was too severe, that the mission had ended before it truly began. Yet here she was, her fingers trembling slightly with anticipation and nerves as the engines roared to life beneath her feet. The hangar echoed with the deep growl of the turbines, each vibration resonating through her body, warning her of the dangers ahead and the limits of the aircraft. Her co-pilot watched silently, their eyes meeting briefly, conveying mutual understanding and unspoken trust. They had been through impossible missions before, but nothing compared to this moment. The aircraft shuddered violently as she taxied toward the runway, each movement a battle against the compromised frame. She could feel the scars of battle etched into every panel, the fuselage groaning with every motion, as if reminding her of its fragility. The mission was clear. Survive, get the plane airborne, and drag her wounded bird back from the brink of destruction. Her heart pounded each beat a drum of adrenaline and fear. She could hear the commander's voice echoing in her mind, saying, "You won't make it back." But she forced herself to push aside doubt, to focus on the task at hand. Every movement was calculated yet instinctive, her training guiding her hands over the throttle's flaps and rudder. The runway stretched ahead, a ribbon of concrete cutting through the early morning haze. She felt the vibrations of the engine beneath her rise as she advanced toward takeoff, each inch forward a negotiation with gravity and fate. The plane shuddered violently, the nose lifting slightly before she forced it down to maintain stability, every vibration a reminder of how close they were to disaster. She glanced at the instruments, the warning lights flashing erratically, but she ignored them, trusting her instincts and experience. The co-pilot monitored the systems silently, their eyes flicking between gauges and the horizon. Her fingers clenched the controls as the runway stretched longer beneath her, the wind whipping past the cockpit and the smell of burning fuel sharp in her nostrils. She felt the plane respond to her commands, each shudder and groan, a dialogue between pilot and machine. The commander had said it was over. Yet the roar of the engines beneath her told her otherwise. She pushed the throttle forward, the A-10 resisting yet yielding to her will. Each meter gained a victory over doubt and fear. The clouds above swirled in pale gold and gray, the sky stretching endlessly and deceptively calm, as if holding its breath for what was to come. Her training kicked in, muscle memory overriding fear. She banked slightly, adjusting trajectory, feeling the strain on every part of the aircraft, each vibration a warning of the limits being tested. The co-pilot whispered status checks, and she responded with nods and brief commands, each one precise and deliberate. The ground fell away beneath them as the wheels lifted. The first few inches, the aircraft trembling violently, the fuselage groaning in protest, sparks flew from stressed metal, and she could feel the sweat running down her temple. Yet she refused to yield. The clouds above beckoned. Her forward, each gust of wind a challenge, every turbulence a reminder that survival required not just skill but courage. She pushed onward, upward through the shaky ascent, knowing that one miscalculation could send them plummeting. The engines coughed, warning of critical strain, yet she forced them to respond, trusting the fragile bond between pilot and machine. She could see the horizon beginning to break into light each moment, a mixture of triumph, fear, and uncertainty. The A-10 shuddered violently. Again, each panel flexing under stress warning lights dancing across the console, yet she held the course eyes fixed forward, scanning for obstacles and potential threats. She knew that every second brought them closer to either safety or disaster, and that the next maneuver could determine the outcome of everything. The commander's words echoed in her mind, a challenge and a taunt, yet also a fuel for determination that she would not fail and that she would drag her A-10 home no matter the cost. The sky stretched endlessly above Captain Reynolds as the A-10 struggled to maintain altitude, each vibration a reminder of the damage hidden beneath its scarred metal skin. She adjusted the throttle cautiously, feeling the engine's protest. Each movement as warning lights flashed frantically across the cockpit. Every shudder and groan of the fuselage echoed through her body, reminding her that the aircraft was barely holding together. yet she forced herself to focus on the horizon and the long journey home. The clouds above shifted in slow, ominous patterns, casting fleeting shadows across the broken landscape below. Each moment required careful calculation, every maneuver a delicate balance between survival and disaster. Co-pilot monitored gauges and systems silently, their eyes flicking back and forth like trained predators, scanning for any anomaly that might spell doom. Reynolds could feel her heart pounding in rhythm with the engines, each beat a drum of adrenaline and fear. She forced herself to steady her breathing to maintain focus despite the constant shudders and the smell of burning hydraulics filling the cockpit. The damaged A-10 was her responsibility. Her companion and her challenge all in one. She knew that every decision would determine whether they would drag the bird back home or whether it would become a tomb in the clouds. The radio crackled intermittently, static and broken voices filling the cabin. Yet no guidance came, only reminders that she was on her own. Each passing second stretched into eternity, every movement critical as she navigated through patches of turbulent air clouds, dense and threatening, hiding unseen dangers. She banked slightly, correcting for a sudden gust that pushed the plane toward a steep drop below each adjustment, sending shivers through the fuselage. Sparks flew from stressed metal, the warning lights screaming for attention. Yet she ignored them, trusting instinct, training, and experience. The landscape below rolled out in fractured shadows, mountains and valleys scarred by previous missions, and the harsh sun casting deceptive illusions that made navigation perilous. Her mind raced, calculating altitude, trajectory, and engine performance. Simultaneously, while keeping vigilant for any sudden structural failure, every inch gained upward felt like a battle won, yet the risk multiplied with each maneuver. She could feel the plane straining against the commands, feeling the tension in the wings and fuselage, her hands gripping the controls. White-knuckled, her co-pilot whispered updates, and she responded with nods and precise commands, each word deliberate and controlled as though they could will the aircraft into survival. The clouds grew thicker, forming dark, ominous curtains obscuring visibility, yet the aircraft persisted, shaking and trembling with each motion of wind and control. She pushed onward through turbulence that threatened to tear the A-10 apart, yet refused to yield to fear. Every vibration, a test of nerve. Every alarm, a question of whether the bird could endure one more second. Sparks and smoke began to curl faintly from a stressed hydraulic panel, warning that the systems were reaching critical failure. Yet she maintained course-adjusting flaps, throttle, and rudder with minute precision, as if coaxing the plane to survive through sheer will. The horizon ahead offered no comfort, only the vast expanse of sky and the unpredictable threat of weather. At altitude, Reynolds could see faint shadows of terrain forming through breaks in the clouds, mountains, and ridges that could destroy the fragile aircraft if miscalculated. The co-pilot remained calm, a mirror of her own discipline, yet she could feel the shared tension pulsing between them. Every glance, every gesture, communicating volumes without words. Each gust of wind, each violent shudder tested both pilot and aircraft to their limits. She felt the plane flex beneath her as if alive. Aware of its own fragility and pleading for relief, sparks flew across panels as metal strained, warning lights flashing warnings that demanded action. Yet she responded with controlled movements, coaxing the A-10 onward through the hostile sky. The smell of smoke oil and fuel filled the cockpit, making breathing harsh. Yet she focused every sense on the controls, the horizon, the cloud cover, the subtle vibrations beneath her fingertips. She knew that one wrong adjustment, one misjudgment could spell disaster and end everything. The commander had said they would never see her fly again, echoed in her mind, fueling her determination to prove the impossible possible. The hours stretched on each one, a battle against fatigue, fear, and the failing systems of the aircraft. She pushed onward through turbulence and stress, navigating by instinct and experience while coaxing the damaged A-10 to survive the seemingly impossible journey back home. Every passing second a victory, every breath a defiance, against the doubt that had declared her finished. Yet she knew the final challenge was still ahead, and that survival would demand everything she had left.